Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the CSEG mentorship Ask Me Anything. I see that there's some people coming in here still. We've got probably give everybody another minute to come trickling in. But while we do that, I think we'll just kick things off by saying welcome. Today we are talking to Neil, and he will be speaking to us about his experience with business development and his career and in general, his work at Eavor, and how he's transitioned from a geoscience role to business development. So just to start, I'll introduce myself and my co-host today. I'm Sarah Grant. I am a volunteer with the Mentorship Committee. I've done a few of these AMAs now, but just sort of transitioning into a role of hosting and running these events. And I will be sort of chatting with Neil as well. Cole will be co-hosting and helping me out today. Cole, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Cole Narfson. I'm a GIT also at Ever. So super excited to have Neil talking today because I know he works on a lot of cool things. I've worked just about 3 years at Ever, but before that worked in like Suncor and other oil and gas roles. So yeah, excited to co-host this today.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole. And for myself, I haven't known a lot about business development and that world. My work experience has been as a geophysicist, currently at Synovus doing interpretation work. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more from Neil as well today. And Cole is an excellent co-host for us to have here because he works at Ever as well. So he's got more context and information on some of these things than what I might be able to supply. So that's great. So in terms of some mentorship housekeeping, just quickly, I wanted to mention that the mentorship group is currently working on putting together a Stampede lunch again for this coming summer. So that's in the works. It's planned for July 8th, Monday, July 8th, lunchtime. We will be selling tickets for, I believe, your lunch and a beer. And there'll be more information about that coming out. So keep an eye out. It'll most likely be in some new CSEG newsletters as well as our LinkedIn page. So if that's something that interests you, we should be providing more information soon on that. Okay, and then next I am going to introduce our speaker today. All right. So today we have Neil Ethier. He's a vice president of business development at Eavor. He's a professional geophysicist with over 20 years of international experience in the oil and gas sector. Neil has global expertise in strategic business development with a technical focus. He brings an enhanced intercultural perspective honed from living on 3 continents and analyzing and evaluating assets in over 50 countries and 100 basins. Neil has been at Eavor for 3.5 years. So welcome, Neil. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I will now share my screen here.
Excellent.
I think you need to stop first.
Okay.
There we go.
And just to let our audience know for today, what we're basically going to be doing going forward is Neil's going to give us a primer of information about Eavor and his work there. And then after that, we will be going into a discussion. We've come prepared with questions for Neil ourselves, but we are looking for and hoping for participation from you, the audience. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop that in the Q&A or chat box, which you can see the tabs at the bottom of your Zoom screen, I believe. And between Cole and myself, we will try and keep that conversation flowing and using your questions as well as our own. And yeah, we'll wrap things up just short of 1 o'clock. So thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah and Cole, for hosting today and inviting me to join and to kind of share my story. Um, My name is Neil Ethier. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Eavor, as was kind of said when in the introduction. And I've done this presentation, or various portions of this presentation, to a lot of university students. And I did it for Rocky Mountain Business School, where the title of the conference was Resilience, and I thought it was a really great one to kind of put an overarching view of my career and my trajectory of my path. And you look at the definition of resilience, it's an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And those are kind of two different things. Sometimes what looks like misfortune is actually change, and it turns out to be the betterment as you go forward. And I think one of the overarching things that I'd like to impart is that you need to build resilience over your life and your career. You're going to get things thrown at you. You're going to have misfortune. You're going to have change. And it's embracing it and it's moving on from that. So in the intro, it said that I'd lived on 3 continents, and you can see the 3 flags there of the 3 continents. And that kind of brings me to what I've done in my career. And my first big change happened when I was going from grade 10 to grade 11. I grew up in Wetaskiwin, a small town in central Alberta. And between grade 10 and grade 11, my parents, who were both school teachers, said, we've spent 20 years teaching in Wetaskiwin and we want to change. We want to do something different. So they went to an international hiring fair and they came home and they said, we have 3 job offers, one in Japan, one in Korea, and one in Poland. Kind of where do you kids want to go? And so we had some discussions as a family, and Japan was the choice. So I moved from Wetaskiwin, Alberta to Osaka, Japan in the early 90s. And I went to high school for 2 years there. So that really opened my eyes to what the world can offer and all the different kind of intercultural communications and how people view things differently and how we view them the same. I came back after being in Japan for a couple of years. I traveled Asia for a year. I came back and I went to University of Alberta, where I studied geophysics. I graduated in the late 90s, and I came and I started at Pan Canadian. That's where I started my career as a geophysicist. I was at Pan Canadian. One of the first projects that I worked on was in West Greenland. I was in the International New Ventures group at that time when the merger happened between Pan Canadian and AEC, where I joined in Canada. I worked in West Greenland, which to me it was really interesting because one of the big things that project allowed for was energy independence and energy autonomy. Greenland was reliant on Denmark. They got payments. Yet they were full of resources, but they just couldn't exploit them. And they were always wanting to be energy independent and energy autonomous. So that kind of stuck with me throughout my whole career. I then moved on to Talisman, where I worked their Algerian assets. I worked North Africa. I went to a small company called Windstar Resources, where I worked their Tunisian assets, as well as Hungary and Romanian assets. And then I decided that, much like my parents, I'd been working for kind of 10 plus years. I said, I want to change. My wife was on board with that. So we moved to France, where I worked as a geophysicist. And I moved there with Vermilion. I led the geosciences team in the Paris Basin for a few years. And when I came back to Canada in 2016, the role that was there was business development. So I kind of flopped very fortunately. That was my big change, was joining that business development role. I still had quite a technical bent to that role. I was doing subsurface evaluations and building out kind of resource assessments, but I was also more exposed to the financial side of things at that time, building out financial models and other pieces of the business development arm. Another misfortune at the time was just before COVID, I was working on their international group. I was traveling to and from Europe. And when COVID hit, I was let go from Vermilion. I kind of survived the 20 plus years of not being let go and the ups and downs. And I was sheltered from a bit of it when I was in France from 2012 to 2016. But what it did allow me was at the time it was misfortune and I was let go, but then the opportunity that was brought forth was the opportunity to come and join an exciting company like Eavor. So that's kind of where I am now. I started as a business analyst. I'm now vice president of business development at Eavor. And so you can kind of see the 3 flags, starting in the oil and gas industry, building a really solid foundation of the subsurface, building on that throughout the time in the oil and gas with the exposure to the business development side of things, and then being able to utilize that in the company that I'm at now with Eavor. So that's a kind of a 3-minute, 4-minute overview of my life. Now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Eavor, and then we'll get into some fireside chat. So Eavor's mission statement is to enable local clean energy autonomy everywhere. And when you look at that and you break it down, it really kind of brings me back to my roots of Greenland is every country in the world wants to be able to have energy autonomy or autonomy, which in order to get autonomy, you need energy autonomy. So that whether that happens at a city level, a state level, a country level, or a group of countries, you really want to be able to have local energy autonomy, and which gives you autonomy. And then the everywhere piece of it is really an interesting one because oil and gas basins are distributed around the globe in very specific parts. And those are very, petrostates who wield a big stick around the globe, kind of geopolitically. But the geothermal is everywhere. So there's heat below us everywhere. There's different gradients of it. There's different quality of that heat below you, but that heat is everywhere. It's not like you don't have an oil and gas basin in Japan, for example, but you do have heat everywhere. So everyone can have this energy autonomy, which is really an exciting story to tell. There's these two existential threats that are facing us right now. One is climate change and one is energy security. I would say when I joined Eavor, much of the focus globally was on the climate change piece of it. But with the invasion into the Ukraine, it has very much shifted to an energy security piece of it. So how do I enable my local citizens and to have that energy security? And that's really been the driving factor of our decision making and where we deploy our resources in the last number of years since that invasion happened. But these are two existential threats, which really we can answer with our one simple solution, which is Everloop. Really an exciting Canadian story. It was founded in 2017 in Calgary, and it was based on this premise that geothermal needs to be scalable, and only closed loop truly can be scalable, meaning it can go anywhere. We have had equity investment of over 315 million Canadian to date. We've had some really wonderful projects, which I'll touch on really quickly. We have Everlight, which was drilled in central Alberta in 2019, which really allowed us to springboard and drill our first commercial project, which we're drilling right now in southern Germany. And we also drilled a project called Everdeep in the US, which drilled down about 5.5 kilometers, testing our drilling technology in deep, hard granitic basement rock. Some wonderful partners who've entrusted us with their capital to build it forward. And you'll see that these are really kind of savvy investors who understand the subsurface extensively, their utilities, their oil and gas companies, their Microsoft climate investment funds. They are some drilling, precision drilling, H&P drilling. So a broad swath of service companies, utilities, and oil and gas companies who have invested into Eavor to really see this solution move forward. When you define energy, so when we bring up the megawatt thermal, we can use it for three things. We can use it for direct heating applications, cooling applications, or electricity generation. So I'm just going to talk about electricity generation here for a minute, and really the three pieces that we look at for that kind of holy grail of electricity generation is it firm? Can you have it at all times? And most of those are kind of run by traditional oil and gas, coal, nuclear, kind of that base load firm piece of it, which is all modern grids run on that. In the middle of the night, you require that your food doesn't spoil. Your fridge keeps going. You go turn on the light in the middle of the night, it turns on. Those are things that clients demand. And those fuel supply chains are controlled by those select few countries. So those are the petrostates that I talked to from the energy security standpoint. The other side is the clean piece of it. So this is what we've seen in a tremendous amount of growth in the last kind of decade in wind and solar in particular. But these are often mutually exclusive to the firm piece of it. This is the intermittency that is the challenge around these firm or these clean resources. And when you look at the mineral supply chain, how do you actually able to execute on projects? You need these rare earth minerals that are supplied and controlled by really select countries, and it's really one country, China, kind of controls most of that supply chain for the solar and most of it for the wind as well. The third piece of this kind of Venn diagram is the scalability, so the ability to go anywhere. Traditional geothermal and geothermal in general makes up a really small amount of the installed capacity globally, makes up about 0.2% of the installed capacity of electricity globally, about 0.4% in the US. So a really small piece of it. The reason it's hard to find, much like oil and gas, you have to find a permeable aquifer with enough deliverability really hard to find. So we feel like we fit in the sweet spot of this Venn diagram where we're firm, clean, and scalable. And this is how we do it. We build a big underground radiator. So we do this by drilling. So this is the expertise coming out of the oil and gas industry. Our company is made up of probably 90% of the people who are in the company spent time in the oil and gas industry. Everlight was drilled just outside of Rocky Mountain House in central Alberta, 2.5 kilometers apart, 2.5 kilometers down, and we drilled and made this connection with two different laterals, and we circulated it through that time and really proved up the thermosiphon, proved up that the thermodynamics work, that we can intersect this at the rock pipe, all the components of the system work, which allowed us to move into our Everloop 1.0, which is the project that we're drilling currently in southern Germany, just south of the city of Munich. It's called Ever Europe. We're drilling down 4.5 kilometers. We're casing and cementing, hydraulically isolating the entire vertical section, and then we're drilling out this radiator. We're drilling into a carbonate unit. We're drilling about 3.5 kilometers out, making that connection, coming back, and we're doing that 12 times. So over 80 kilometers of 8.5-inch radiator we're drilling into and building out this subsurface heat exchanger. Fill it with water, maybe a little bit of biocide and corrosion inhibitors, and start flowing it, and it will flow like that for the next 100 years. As long as you're extracting energy from the subsurface or from at the surface, it will flow, and it's just a density difference. It's a colder, more dense fluid, and it will flow by itself. This big underground heat exchanger bringing those megawatts thermal to the surface. The other one is an Everloop 2.0, which is drilling into deep granitic basement and drilling as deep as you can. The deeper you go, there's a temperature gradient. That the deeper you go, the hotter you get, the more energy that's in the rock. We want to drill as deep as we can get. We drilled down to about 5.5 kilometers in our project in New Mexico. And these are the types of installation that we'll be looking at doing for our projects in Canada and the US. I love all geothermal for these top 5 reasons. The firm, the low surface footprint, clean energy source, low material intensity. But really the differentiator for us is that we can go anywhere, and the scalable nature of it, which has all of these other pieces that we have much more predictable output, water usage, no fracking, no induced seismicity. So all of these things that make it scalable kind of differentiate us and allow us to move forward. Our business model is a technology business model. We want to build this technology and allow all other individuals, companies to be able to go out and execute and utilize their technology, and then we will collect a royalty on that. So that's our business model at Eavor. This is a quick slide that just shows some of the benefits of it. So if you look at emissions intensity, so this is looking at full scope 3 emissions from cradle to grave. What does it take to build these things? So for an Everloop, it's the building of the casing, it's the fabrication of the cement, it's the men and women who drive their vehicles to the site, it's the drilling of the Everloop, it's the decommissioning at the other end. That makes up about 10 kilotons of CO2 equivalent per terawatt hour produced, which is about equivalent to onshore and offshore wind, about 4 or 5 times better than solar PV or biomass, and an order of magnitude better than the fossil fuel piece of it. The other one is the material intensity. So I alluded to this earlier. What do you need to build these things? So for an Everloop, it's very much like oil and gas. You just need steel, cement, the drill rigs, those types of things. For the other 2 intermittent resources, you need rare earth elements, you need cadmium, gallium, tellurium, all these things that are difficult to get. And so we fit in the sweet spot of this where we're low materials intensity and a low emissions intensity. And one of the things I talk a lot to governments, I go to the US government, I talk to different provincial governments, is the ability for us to be world leaders in this. When you look at where solar and wind are, we are followers, and we are importing all of this expertise. Whereas in the drilling, no one drills and has more knowledge than in North America. So this is a really strong narrative that we tell to different levels of federal and state governments, provincial governments, that we could be the leader in this. We are the GDP export engine that really has this knowledge base, and it's really a temporal piece. This could be taken if we don't seize this opportunity to be the world leader. Someone else could jump in and do that. So it's a really unique space and time for us to be in this space. From a business development standpoint, I just wanted to talk to you about what I do in my day-to-day job. So really, every project that Eavor brings in, we have a kind of a set standard that goes through. We have a pre-feasibility, we have a feasibility study piece of it, building off into the development and the realization. So I'm intricately involved in the front end piece of it, talking to customers, talking to different policy stakeholders, as I alluded to, looking at building relationships, working through the understanding when is an opportunity, when is an Everloop work at this site, what are what are your options? What are your pricing? Those types of things. And then into the development, it starts to really hand over. There's a lot of geosciences work that happens in the feasibility piece. So this would be a piece that Cole works on. And then as you move into the development, I really start to pass the baton and work through some of those agreements. So the term sheets, the offtake contracts, the land access agreements, I work on a lot of that piece of it. And then really am that continuation from a relationship standpoint, but it really gets passed on to the development team at that point to go through and execute on the development of the project and then the realization piece of it. This is our first commercial project. It's exciting. We're drilling this right now in Germany. This is what it looks like. There's 2 rigs that are drilling simultaneously, drilling down. Currently, we're drilling out the radiator section, so the Eavor portion, and a really exciting project that will have first electrons by the end of this year at that project. This is an updated picture. On the right-hand side, this is what the site looked like when it was in infancy. It was actually drilled on 2 failed geothermal wells that an existing operator went in, tried to find geothermal. The deliverability wasn't there. We came in and we said, well, yeah, it's relatively hot. The pads are there. Let's go and execute. The German government had a feed-in tariff, so we're working through that. We got a European Union Innovation Fund grant. So these are the updated photos from last week. We're building our organic Rankine cycle, which is this image in the top right-hand side. These big tanks are going to be for our rock pipe sealant. So it really, things are happening. It's a big, exciting project, and it's really unique to be in this kind of pristine Bavarian countryside and drilling this exciting project. This is my second last slide here. It's just showing that we don't need to only do this for electricity. We're also doing this for heating applications. So this is a project that we're working on in downtown Toronto. They have these big district heating networks where they're heating residential buildings, commercial buildings, all of downtown are heated with traditional, typically fossil fuel fired steam producing that will go into these buildings. We will then build up to 3 Eavor loops on this area called Villiers Island, which is a reclaimed, more industrial site that they want to beautify, reroute the Don River, build up some commercial and residentials. We'll build up to 3 Eavor loops on this site and then feed it into the eastern expansion of N-Waves. Currently, they have a budget. City of Toronto approved a budget to drill a stratigraphic well down to about 2 kilometers depth to really test that thermal conductivity and temperature grading to see what our output of an Eavor loop will be at this site. Final slide here, just showing that we're a global company. There tends to be a grouping around the Western US. It has a higher background heat flow. So that's why we are focusing on the Western US. It's more capitally efficient in some of these early projects. Some island markets, Ring of Fire, and then of course a lot of projects in Germany as well, both heating and electricity generation. So that wraps up. How long did I do? Oh, I was 20 minutes. I was longer. Sorry, Sarah. I'm going to get you into the questions now. I'm stopping right now.
Awesome. No, thank you, Neil. That was really, really interesting. I feel like I picked up a lot of new pieces of information from that. So that's a great place to start. Great. Okay, so just as a reminder to our attendees, please feel free to type a question or comment in either the Q&A or chat box as we go through. Sort of the purpose of this format is to keep the conversation going and to be able to interact and have everybody involved. To kick things off, though, I wanted to start the conversation with you, Neil, about what sort of main tasks, work life, and personality traits would you say are common or beneficial to have for someone in a business development role, especially in the energy industry?
That's a great question. I would say, first and foremost, you need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to build those relationships. A lot of business development is going out, talking to people, understanding what their needs are, and then also being able to strategically look at it and say, how can my solution, what can I offer to your problems? How does my solution fit to that? So I would say strategic thinking and relationship building are top of mind. One of the benefits that I have is the strong founding in a technical, 20 years in oil and gas. I have a strong understanding of what the client needs and also what we can deliver as a product. but that it's not necessary. There's people on my business development team who don't have that subsurface knowledge who are able to do that, and it's really about relationship building and strategic thinking.
Awesome. And would you say that your your day-to-day life and the quality of life that you have has shifted at all when you've moved from a technical role to a business-oriented role?
Another good question. When I was in my technical role, I traveled a lot. I was in the International New Ventures group when I was at Pan Canadian and then to Encana. I was working in North Africa for two different companies, and then I moved to France, where I was obviously stationed there. But I was traveling a lot, and those were big trips. They were going to Algeria for, you can't just easily get to Algeria. It takes a day and a half to get there, a day and a half to get home, and you're flying into a camp, and they only fly out twice a week, and so you were gone from your family. So those were challenging. I would say that I travel more frequently now, but they're often shorter trips. I was in San Francisco last week for 2 days. I'm going to Toronto for 3 days, leaving on Sunday back. So often those are shorter trips in the same time zone, which is much easier on your body as well. From a work-life balance, I have three kids, aged 10, 13, and 16. I coach all three of them. I still try and keep up that life balance piece of it as well by being involved in their life. I mean, there's times when you can't do that when you're away and you have to have strong assistant coaches or other head coaches to be able to do that. But from a work-life balance, I'm trying to be involved with them as much as possible. Some of the other challenges is working globally. So I would often have meetings first thing in the morning with our European counterparties, work in North America, South America for the entire day, and then have calls with Japan or Australia into the evening. So that can also eat into your personal life. I know that Cole does similar sorts of things where you're on calls with different time zones, which is a challenge for a company like ours.
Yeah. So, yeah, totally fair. And I like that you recognize some of those challenges, especially with the time zone thing. Um, so there are a couple questions, but they're a little bit more technically focused. So I think we might just ask a couple more broad questions before getting into those ones in the chat. So I know you kind of hinted at it, but I just wanted to ask, what would you say you enjoy most about your role? Is it traveling? Is it sort of talking to like foreign delegates and US senators type of thing? What is your sort of favorite part?
Traveling is definitely not my favorite part. I have traveled
Okay.
for 25 years, so I don't get on an airplane unless there's a real reason to do it. And there often is. I mean, I travel all the time. So yes, traveling, I enjoy it, but it's hard on your body. And once you've been on like get this platinum status for every airline, you realize you travel too much. But I do enjoy the aspect of meeting different cultures. I'm actually planning to go back to Japan in April to meet with some counterparties there. We have some investors who are Japanese. We're looking at advancing projects there. I haven't been there for 30 years, so I'm really excited about kind of going back to a country that I lived in for 3 years. Um, been to Germany a few times, been to South America. So those are more exciting than going to San Francisco or Texas or Colorado or something. Those are just ones that you do and you're basically inside of a hotel room or a conference room and then you're back on a plane. So those are less exciting than some of the more cultural pieces. And I also enjoy meeting different cultures as well and having those discussions. And so those can happen at Zoom levels. Those can happen um, being able to interact with different cultures is something that I value very much. The things that I like but most about my job is sharing that excitement about energy, security, and autonomy for everyone. I mean, this is such an exciting story to tell. Both sides of the aisle, whether you're Democrat, Republican, countries who are looking to decarbonize. How do I do this? What are my answers? I'm looking at 2020, 2030, 2035. They need to know about our solution. They need to know that this is coming down, that these are real opportunities. And then when you can share, depending on what jurisdiction you're into, sharing that they could actually be the leader in this. You're talking to the Canadians and Americans. You have the ability to be the leader in this technology. And so that's a really exciting story to tell as well. So I would say the most exciting part of my job, besides the people I work with, I mean, there's just such fantastic people who work at Ever. I mean, that is the most exciting part of my job is interacting with the people at Ever. And then second is going out and telling that story whether it be senators or energy ministers of different governments or that type of thing, or companies who are looking to decarbonize, the whole gamut.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like a very exciting, there's a very exciting future in this. And that leads to the follow-up question of what do you see for the future of geoscience within the energy industry and for business-related roles such as yours?
I see it as exceptionally rosy and bright. I mean, we are going to grow exponentially, and we are going to need geoscientists, engineers, finance people, business people to be able to grow. That's actually the biggest challenge, and that's what keeps me awake at night is the people coming into the profession. We've seen a dramatic drop off of enrollment in university courses, and I think that some of these people are thinking, oh, I just need to be in the oil and gas industry. But a geoscientist is a geoscientist, as Cole can kind of attest. I spent 20 years in that. You can do other things. There's hard rock, there's soft rock, and there's also geothermal, which when I was going to school, you were either hard rock or soft rock. Geothermal was not even on my radar. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that I could have a job in this. But I think that some of the discussions that we're having with big universities in the US, how do we build out geothermal programs into existing petroleum programs? How do we augment that? How do we get the message out that yes, you may be disillusioned with things that are going in the oil and gas, or maybe you're happy in that, which is great, but there is an opportunity outside of that with your skill sets to be able to do it in other industries, and an industry that's frankly growing and is a really exciting place to be.
Great. I might just wrap up this with one follow-up question to that, and then Cole, at that point, maybe we can start to move towards the sort of more technical geothermal oriented questions that I see are getting entered into the chat board here. To build on that, what challenges do you see ahead of us for the industry and for academia? What sort of changes do we need to make? And what do individuals who are interested in doing this, what sort of advice do you have for them?
I would say some of the challenges I alluded to, I think it's going to be the people. I think that's going to be my biggest challenge, is having the experience level to be able to go and scale massively as we want to do. Other challenges, there's supply chain challenges, there's rig availability challenges, there's sometimes there's policy challenges, there's permitting challenges in the US, there's interconnection queue challenges, there's infrastructure. So there are challenges that we need to overcome, but I think it's through education, it's through discussions and kind of explaining what our solution can bring to the table is one that really is an exciting thing to share. Yeah, I would say that those are kind of the piece. But for someone transitioning over, the world is there. Maybe it's just my own echo chamber, but everything on LinkedIn is geothermal to me now. I see it all. There's a lot of different companies that are hiring. At Eavor, we're hiring. We have huge growth plans. I think I was employee number 19, kind of 3.5 years ago. We're now over 100 employees with a massive growth, both in the Canadian office and in the German office. So I would say that we're growing. Other geothermal companies are growing. It's really an exciting space to be in right now. And it's not one that, I think you can jump back and forth. If something, you spend a few years, we had a driller who spent some time here at Eavor and he went back to the oil and gas world. I mean, there's that ability to move that way as well. You don't just need to come from oil and gas and you will be a geothermal person forever. I think you're going to learn different skills. Your skills will be more valued in the oil and gas world if you diversify and you know more about different aspects of geosciences that you learn in the oil and gas, or in the geothermal piece, to be able to take back to oil and gas as well.
Good points. So I am just going to switch it up and ask some of these more technical questions to you, Neil. So Chioma, said basically nice presentation. Other than geothermal gradient and maybe reservoir properties like porosity, what other criteria do you consider in choosing the right location or reservoir?
So I will speak from the surface standpoint, and then I'm going to pass it to you, Cole, who is actually an expert in the subsurface standpoint. So from a surface standpoint, there's different things that we'll look at. So we'll look at, for electricity generation, is there interconnection? Are there existing transmission lines nearby? Is there an off-taker? So that's a person who will sign a power purchase agreement. Are they nearby? What are the regulations of the state? Are there renewable portfolio standards that they have to meet? What is the power pricing that you get? Is there a thing called resource adequacy in California that you pay a premium for? What jurisdiction are you in? You know, what are the pricing that you're going to get? Are there incentives like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US? The Canadians have put forth in their budget proposal to do a similar sort of investment tax credit to not be left behind. In Germany, you have a feed-in tariff. So what does that look like from the surface standpoint? How can I permit on this? Am I in a sage grouse area where you can't permit? Am I in a city where finding the amount of space to be able to build an Everloop for heat, is that going to be challenged? This Spilliers Island is a perfect example. We can do that in Toronto because it's a kind of a pristine new chunk of land. That's not always available. Tough to do in downtown New York. So all of those types of things from a surface standpoint are critical, and those are part of that evaluation. From a subsurface standpoint, I'm going to pass it off to Cole because you are the expert in this, and you can maybe touch on some of that would be great. Answer your own
Sure.
question.
Expert's a strong word, but yeah, I can try to answer this and maybe the next question too in two birds, one stone fashion. So at Ever, we um, don't necessarily target what traditional geothermal reservoirs or traditional geothermal companies target. So they'll target like very specific types of rock, like fractured rock near volcanoes. So it's really, really hot and fractured, so you have sufficient porosity and permeability. Or if it's not like a hydrothermal project like that, they might target a sedimentary basin, aquifer, sedimentary basin play where you just, similar to oil and gas, is like good reservoir properties, porosity, permeability type of thing. Forever, since we're a closed loop system, we don't depend on the reservoir properties as much. We would actually arguably prefer if it's tighter, more competent rock, and we seal our entire multilateral section with rock pipe. So for us, like it sort of depends on what the sedimentary thickness is. So is it a sedimentary basin type of area, or is it a crystalline hard rock type of area geology? So if it's deep enough sedimentary basin wise, we might do a 1.0, similar to our project in Gare Street, Germany. But if it's not thick enough sedimentary basin or high enough temperatures to do that sort of horizontal well, we might do that really, really deep 2.0 design, which is what our New Mexico demonstration project was into crystalline granitic rock. And so for the second question from Afiz about what kind of geophysical investigations help us identify a suitable site, we try to use whatever data is available. So we'll use gravity, magnetics, MT, like resistivity surveys, seismic, if possible. A lot of times we aren't as lucky with seismic. Say, for example, to have like a 3D seismic volume, we might only have like 2D lines, and usually those 2D lines might be really vintage. And they have been processed to optimally image basically geology in the shallow section or shallower section where oil and gas reservoirs are. And at depth where potentially we're looking, they're not as great. So we use like everything that's available to us. Another one or another question, technical question from Nanoska. Considering that a more favorable geothermal gradient tends to be in areas in northern Canada, either BC or Alberta, where First Nation communities reside, has Ever engaged with these communities? And if so, what is the current sentiment from them towards geothermal projects?
Excellent. Absolutely, yes. One of the challenges with First Nations communities tends to be the smaller amount of energy that they need. So that is a challenge. But some of the more from a remote standpoint, what they're what their avoided costs are. Some of them are running on diesel generators. What does that look like from a carbon footprint versus now building an Everloop? So another very interesting piece is the relationship with the land. So First Nations have a very strong relationship with the land, and so building wind turbines or solar panels may not necessarily fit with their overall view of how they want the land to be entrusted onto their children and their grandchildren. And a geothermal has a very, very small surface footprint. So it's much more benign, low water usage. So that narrative around the environmental or impact on the land is one that resonates very well. But energy security is a huge challenge. We have a project, we have a subsidiary called Ever Yukon, where we have investors into that. Little Salmon Carmacks First Nations are investors in that. We've talked with numerous First Nations groups within BC and Alberta, and they're all very excited about it, I would say. That piece to be able to have energy autonomy. Some of the First Nations have been blessed with oil and gas reserves where they're very, there's a wealth discrepancy between First Nations that are sitting on wealthier lands versus others. And with geothermal, everyone can have that. And so is there a royalty payment? Is there benefits to the community that they can have from an energy resilient, energy autonomy, as well as potential revenue generation? So I would say that it's a very exciting opportunity for First Nations groups. And we're talking with a lot of them.
Awesome. A sort of follow-up question related to kind of Canada and provincial governments. Just was wondering your thoughts on what regulations or laws are in place for geothermal development in Canada.
It's very much jurisdiction dependent. So every province has a different regulation and every state has a different regulation. That's one of the challenges about going into a new place, is saying, can I actually execute on this? How do I get a geothermal license? How do I drill a geothermal well? What are the regulations in place? So Alberta took a huge step forward a year and a half ago when they passed the Geothermal Resources Development Act. And so that helped to create a framework that allows investment to come into a province that says, yes, there's a framework, there's a regulatory process in place that will allow me to go and execute on the project. There are some challenges in Alberta with the renewable moratorium. I think there's some insight into what that looks like that was just kind of disseminated today with some corridors of non-activity and those types of things. So overall, I would say that from a regulatory standpoint, you need to have that regulatory certainty to move forward with projects, and it's involving different regulators. We're working in Colorado at their Energy Commission, who are now building out the regulations to develop geothermal. And it's really important for us to be involved in those discussions, because if they're just doing traditional geothermal, often well classifications and the ability to execute, and we just circulate fluid, so you can't have injectors and producers, and if you don't inject anything in, you become red flagged and non-compliant that you didn't say how much you were injecting, even though it's classified as an injecting well and you're not injecting anything, so you get flagged and you need to go and deal with that. So it's really education with those regulators and building it out and making sure that we can execute with our type of projects.
Great. So I think we'll just give, we'll do one more sort of more technical related question. And then at that point, we'll start to talk a little bit more about mentorship and your career development, Neil. So the last technical question I thought we should touch on is from Afiz, asking about the challenges of drilling into crystalline rock as opposed to sedimentary lithology.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And, I would say an order of magnitude more drilling has happened in sedimentary rock. And so the advancements in drill bits and mud weights and understanding how to drill those is way superior to drilling into that hard crystalline basement. So that is both a challenge and an opportunity. Because so little of it's been done, we're going to see massive improvements as we tweak things, as we move down the cost curve. We saw that when we drilled our first leg in New Mexico to the second leg, our productive time went up by about 35%. So we were 35% more effective in drilling. That learning curve also happened in Forge, which is a Department of Energy funded site in central Utah, where they've seen massive improvements of bits and understanding as you drill this geology over and over again. So we want to drill 80 kilometers of subsurface radiator per Everloop. That's more than almost all the granitic basement that's ever been drilled historically on the planet. And so when we do that with the same geology, the same men and women at the same site, those improvements are going to happen really quickly.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. The progression and the changes that we'll see as we go through this. It must just be, we're sort of just launching, and watching those changes and those improvements happen is going to be such a learning opportunity for everybody involved and everybody who's watching from the sidelines as well. I look forward to it. Okay, and now Neil, I wanted to ask you, in terms of mentorship, since that's what this committee is organized around, who were some of your greatest mentors? Why, and what role has that had in your career?
Really great question, and they are so important. You know, when you look at my very first, Kevin Coughlin, worked at Shell when I was a summer student when I first got there, and just really understanding, what does a geophysicist do? How do I, when you're first coming out of school, it's very different when you're training that you got at University of Alberta versus now I'm working in Shell, doing pore pressure prediction off the coast of Nova Scotia. You know, extremely different, and just being able to have that mentor to be able to help navigate through some of those earlier challenges in your career. My first full-time job was a Pan Canadian. Very fortunate to be in Mark Cooper's new venture group. So he was a geologist who had a broad swath of experience. He'd lived in South America. He was an English guy, and really shared that global expansive knowledge and understanding of different cultures. We went into Greenland, worked with other people there who had worked a lot of international basins, with some other names that come to mind: Rob Gardner, who worked a lot of Middle East, Roger Fife, who lived in Norway. And so all of these guys bring this huge amount of value of really understanding different cultures and the way different people work in different jurisdictions. And I think that was really valuable for me. And those guys tended to be older than me, but that wasn't always the case. Sometimes your mentors can be similar age group to you, or even younger, but they have different skill sets. And so, you know, getting that mentorship from them and discussing some of those reminds me of a Chris Edwards, who I worked with in France, who was a brilliant kind of strategic thinker, and really out of the box. And he was an engineer, but you know, what I gained from him was different than others. So for me, I was never part of an official mentorship program, but I always sought them out, and would ask questions, and you know, kind of build on that, and whether it's out for dinner on a business trip, asking those questions, or going for a coffee with someone, really building and forging those relationships is really important, and it opens doors as well. When I first moved to from Encana to Talisman, it was relationships that moved me there. It was a guy who I'd worked with who called me up and said, "Hey, we're looking for a geophysicist in Trinidad and Tobago." I interviewed, I ended up working in North Africa, but it was those kind of discussions, interactions, and connections that really open up a lot of doors.
Awesome. One other question that I'd like to ask would just be, and we ask this to a lot of the people that we have on, but be super interested to hear what your thoughts are. What would your advice be to young geoscientists, or someone early on in their career, thinking of, you know, trying to figure out what they want to do in geoscience or business development related roles?
That is an easy one for me to answer. It would be curious always. Try and learn, be uncomfortable, go into new situations, explore different things, talk to different people, read different books that are outside of your comfort level, ask stupid questions, just be really a curious person, and that will open tons of doors. So never stop learning, always have an appetite for that, always be curious, and don't be afraid of sounding stupid, because we've all sounded stupid in our life. So you're going to ask stupid questions sometimes, but everyone understands that. And I would say, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, ask those questions, and always try and better yourself, and learn new skills. You can get stuck and become an expert at something, which some people want to do that. You want to be a 3D processor, and that's what you want to do for your life. Fantastic. You're still going to be learning different ways to tweak and better that. I am more on the side of a jack of all trades, master of none. I want to have a broad breadth of knowledge and learn and be curious about a ton of different things. So I think everyone has their own individual needs, and so what do you want to do, have you out of your career? If you want to work in one basin and do that, be an expert on that, that's fantastic. We need those. But other people are not wanting that. They're wanting to jump around. And me being an international, I worked in tons of different basins, had lots of different experiences, and that really allowed me to be where I am today.
Wonderful. I think that's just beautiful advice. And, you know, it sounds to me like some of the key points or words that you said today that really resonate for me is, you know, resilience, agility, and curiosity. And I think that those are important lessons for all of us, no matter where you are in your career, if you're starting out, if you're still making a decision of which direction you want to start going into, or if you're in the middle or later stage of your career, if you're looking at changing or just growing within the role you're in. I know I feel those are important things for myself. And I think whether you're in business analysis or technical or something not even in the energy industry, these are things that we can carry through our lives. And I think that mentorship also helps to sort of remind us of these things, whether that's acting as a mentor or as a mentee. You know, I'm going to plug mentorship here as we wrap up. For all those attending who are interested, please consider signing up for our mentorship group. We pair mentors with mentees. You can choose to be one, the other, or both. And it really does serve a role of not only teaching mentees and providing support and guidance. You have the opportunity to sort of choose how to navigate that with them, as well as teaching the mentors themselves and reminding us to have some curiosity and potential new opportunities or new ways of thinking and approaching things. So yeah, with that, I just want to remind everybody as well that we have the Stampede Lunch coming up this summer on July 8th. So keep an eye out online for that. Check out our LinkedIn page or go to the CSEG mentorship website. You can find that if you just type it in on the internet. And consider signing up if you're not already a part of it. We've had a really successful year with lots of, I think, potentially a record-setting number of pairings. And I think we're only going to get better. So please consider participating. I think it provides a lot to everybody involved, the energy and everything. Thank you so much, Neil and Cole. Cole, you did a great job today. I really appreciate you helping with co-hosting as well as fielding some questions along the way. You did a great job with that. I think I would have been scrambling a little bit if somebody had pitched a question back at me like that. So I appreciate both of your help today and participation today.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you both for having us, Sarah and Cole. It was my pleasure to be part of this. And I just wanted to mention as well, anyone on the call, happy for you to reach out to me, send me a LinkedIn message. I'd love to connect with you and see how things progress in your careers.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you to our attendees for sticking by and for your questions. Keep an eye out for our next AMA. We don't have a specific topic scheduled. If you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to send it to the CSEG mentorship or our LinkedIn page. We're always looking for new, exciting topics. And with that, we will end the meeting. And